doing the cash management duties, I also have on Thursdays, I'm at Founder 66 as a banker in residence program. And we're there to provide education and resources for anybody, not just Chelsea Groton customers. So any questions you have about your business, we can try to answer them or put you in touch with subject matter experts. So, feel free to reach out to us there, stop by. Right now we're there Thursdays, 9 to 12. So I'd like to introduce Rich. He's with our commercial lending department, so he can kick off the evening.
Great, thank you. And, it's great seeing, Jen and Kathleen join us as well, just because a big part of this is with every business, it's very dynamic. There's always a lot of different components, and a big part of this is figuring out, what your business specifically needs, what it is that is important to you and where you're going. So that could be any one of our types of roles here. So by all means, if there's any specific questions you have, feel free to chime in and let us know. I mean, the great thing about doing some of this in a small group format is that, it's a great opportunity to ask questions. So if there's anything specific you want to spend more time on or have any questions on, just let us know. But I'll share my screen now so we can kind of go through the presentation here. So a big part of this is really looking at from a planning perspective, moving forward and depending on what stage you're at in the planning process, just breaking that down into manageable components. Bear with me for 1 second here. Can everybody see the presentation okay? Perfect. So looking at this just real quick on the agenda, and again, if there's anything that you want to spend a little bit more time on, feel free to just pause, raise your hand, put something in the chat, and we can spend some time on that. But a big objective of this course is, like I mentioned, is really to kind of break down the process into smaller, manageable pieces. So a lot of times when you look at a business plan, it's a little overwhelming. There's a lot of different components that go into it. And to me, I've always found that the biggest driver here is really to take a look at it and say, what is the purpose of this document? Why is it important? And making sure that it works for you. So this course, the goal is really to kind of look at a couple different ways to utilize that and some important things that you want to include throughout that. So just real quick, I don't know if you guys want to share kind of where you are in the planning process. If, are you kind of just starting out, are you established, are you looking to enhance that going forward? If you want to maybe even chime in on the chat, it's always helpful to kind of know where you guys are in the process there. We can spend a little bit more time at that phase if you want. All right, so we're going to do kind of a quick overview of really the whole process. And kind of going through, and again, it's to really kind of break it down into, bite-sized pieces throughout. And it's really, the model we're using is a 4-step model to kind of break that down and go through. So learning objectives tonight, number one is really explain how having an evolving planning process can help make key decisions for you. This has been especially important if you look at kind of the COVID impact. Of what we've gone through in the last year and a half or so. Things are kind of in a constantly changing environment. You think about, at the start of the pandemic with impacts from, mandatory closures to what we're dealing with today with a lot of supply chain issues, regulatory environment, a number of different challenges that really kind of come up throughout. And what we really recommend is that business plan is really kind of a key component for kind of the guiding process throughout. It's something that you can revisit when all of these changes are happening, and you can kind of revisit that and kind of bring you back to what's your ultimate goal, what are you really driving at, and who are you really trying to target as part of your objectives. Describe how to convert a vague idea into a resource plan. So You know, I'm not personally an entrepreneur, but, you know, I've had plenty of moments where I've had that kind of wake up in the middle of a night with an idea and scratch it on the back of a notepad. And so, you know, how do you take that, you know, from its infancy stage and convert that into a plan that's actionable, that you can really move forward with? Explain the importance of a healthy personal credit score and healthy relationships with lenders. And even just to expand on that, you know, I'd say expanding that healthy relationships with really your full sphere of influence, your financial advisor, your attorney, your accountant. These are all important relationships to maintain, because depending on what issue you're dealing with, there's probably a professional in your circle that has dealt with it one way or another, and can kind of help guide you through that problem as well. So that's always an important consideration. Describe how a business plan helps motivate stakeholders and to understand and support your business ideas. So that's also an important thing, because, you know, for the people that are involved in your business, motivation is a big thing. And especially for a business owner, understanding what it is that you're even in business for. Understanding, are you there to make an income? Are you there to support a passion of yours? Is it the new term I hear all the time is side hustle? Is that what it is for you? You know, it's going to play a role in your life, and, you know, understanding what that motivation is, because again, this is sort of the grounding document to kind of come back to make sure that what you're doing is part of what you're reaching for your personal goals. And explaining the benefits of creating a day-to-day action plan for running a small business. So again, this is meant to really be, if there's one takeaway, I always try to emphasize is, too often I find business owners will develop a business plan with the intent to bring to the bank, and, you know, it's meant to be there because somebody said it was required to get a loan, or an investor was requiring it to make a pitch. But really, this is, when I've seen it used effectively, it was used as a living document to revisit, you know, make changes on the fly as your business evolves. That plan should evolve with it. And again, just kind of revisiting that and just making sure that, you know, when you've set out on your course, that you're staying on that course. So the big example that we use is a woman named Sophia. She's in the participant guide, and basically Sophia has a great idea. She wants to start a cell phone repair business. And I remember the first time I read this, I remember thinking, you know, the last time I bought an iPhone, it was over $1,000. And they aren't exactly just as easily replaceable when they're that expensive either. So I thought, you know, this is a great idea. So she's setting out in this phase. This is her idea, something that she's passionate about, and now she needs to figure out how she's going to get there. So she's going to go through the 4-stage planning process as an example here. So again, as the business grows, the planning approaches need to change. It's meant to be a dynamic living document. So as the business evolves, and that's important to remember, because where you are on day one is going to be drastically different from where you are on, you know, year 2 when you're doing that planning process. And as we go through this plan, again, I really want to emphasize, if there's any particular areas that you want to stop or spend more time on in this process that might be more applicable to your stage, you know, please let me know, because this is really meant to be as individualized as we can make it for you as well. So again, we talked a little bit about kind of where are you in the planning stage, and again, this is meant to kind of cover all 4 stages, and we're going to, you know, constantly look at that as a running loop. So sometimes I've seen businesses that have kind of gone back to stage 1 because of where their business took a turn and really developed a new product line or whatever it may be. And so again, you can kind of constantly revisit that. So again, the 4-step model here. So the step 1 is really going to be the back of the napkin plan, the go or no go, or like I said before, it's, you know, you wake up at midnight with a great idea and you reach over and you write it down on a scratch pad, and you're just thinking, okay, is this a good idea? And at that stage, what you're really looking for is there anything there that is too big of a hurdle to overcome? You know, something that's going to stop the idea in its tracks. Step 2 is going to be the resource plan. what do I need to go? What is it going to take to get this business off the ground? And is that attainable? Step 3 is the actual business plan. So now you've got enough information to say, okay, I understand what I need. I understand what the objective is. But let me formulate that in an idea that not only works for me, that is much more detailed, but is also shareable with kind of that sphere of influence, your banker, your attorney, your CPA, to talk about what your goals are. And then step 4 is your action plan is, what are you going to do to actually execute that plan? And how do you put that into place? Okay, so here's just a hypothetical example, and I always say this is an important part of the process, is setting reasonable expectations and guidelines for your time frame here. Anybody that thinks, you have this great idea, and it's always a tough thing, is you have this great idea, you want to start a business, and all that excitement builds up, and a lot of times what happens is a business owner feels that pressure to get started and jump in too early. And when you skip stages, sometimes it works out, but oftentimes I find that it creates more hassle and aggravation and frustration with the process. And ultimately, those kind of issues kind of creep into the operations of the company. And you've got to remember what it is that you got into it. More than likely you got into a business because you had a passion or a skill for doing something. And that's the one thing you kind of always want to keep alive. So this is just a hypothetical example that, Sophia scratched on the back of the napkin as she was looking forward to, what she wants to do. So year 1, she sketches it out, the idea, roughly what is this cell phone repair business going to look like? In year 1, she also starts building out the resource plan. She's planning on, okay, what do I need to prepare for this? It's not often that somebody says, well, you know what, I've got a great business idea and I've got all the capital I need sitting in my bank account. Oftentimes it's, I've got a great idea, I know what I need to start getting for resources, and it's time to start planning for that. How am I going to start saving up for this venture? How am I going to obtain what I need? And that all takes time. So in Sophia's model, year 2 is where she really has her business plan. She also wanted to work to improve her credit score, so she'd be prepared to go get the financing that she needed. So she worked through that year 2. And again, credit score isn't something that you're necessarily going to change overnight. So again, she kept that in mind that, she's going to need some time to do that. And then step 4 is the action plan when she actually goes to implementation. So one thing you'll notice at the bottom of the chart as well is you see in year 1, Sophia works full-time in her day job. And then in year 2, she transitions to part-time and then ultimately goes on to work in her company full-time. And that's an important consideration to think about, because it's one thing to jot down your resource plan to say, okay, this is what the business is going to need to survive. But don't forget, you have a lifestyle to maintain. You've got rent, utilities, overhead, personally that you need to cover, and having a plan to address that as well, especially in the event that maybe sales take a little bit longer to build than what you originally anticipate. Maybe there's some type of hiccup the business experiences. You just want to be able to have as much flexibility as possible. So in Sophia's case, she decided that the best way to handle that was to transition into the business and kind of run them parallel while working full-time and then ultimately part-time, so she can cover those needs. So back to kind of step 1, Sophia's looking at the back of a napkin approach. So she's saying fixed smartphones, tablets, appliances, and this is the part that I really liked, is in parentheses she puts maybe later, because I think that, going back to this is a living document, jot those things down. I mean, I've always kept a journal of different ideas that I've had, and some of them I know will never come to fruition. Sometimes there's some ideas that do. Sometimes it's just a matter of timing. I actually frankly do it here at the bank. I jot things down for, could be process improvements or something else that is an idea. And, you never know when you might need it, but it's good to always kind of take a look at and see, because I find if I don't write it down, there's a good chance that idea may not come back again. So again, she's starting to consider, what do I need here? What is my credit score? And am I in a position to do this? Do I need a website? Who's my competition? So at this stage, it's more about just jotting down what kind of hurdles could be in the way. Is there anything in here that's going to say, this is too monumental for me, or this isn't what I really wanted? It sounded like a great idea at first, but maybe now that I ask a few more questions, it's not. Just jot them down, because like I said, once they're fresh in your mind, you want to get those on paper, and then you can sit and take some time to really think about them, do the research, and understand, so that when the time comes for you to make that go or no-go decision, it's an informed decision. It's one that you've researched and thought about, and that you feel comfortable making. It's not made out of emotion. It's not made, irrationally. It's made with a well thought out process. And actually, the last question on there too that I didn't hit on is the last question: am I ready for this? I've met plenty of people over the time that, it's a great idea. They have the resources to pull it off, but for whatever reason, it was just not the right time for them in their life to do that. And it could be it could be personal reasons, it could be career reasons. I mean, there's so many different ways that could impact you. But I've always thought that that's sort of the ultimate answer that I've found is, am I ready to actually do this? Because once you're in, you want to make sure that you're all the way in. So again, just a few more of the key questions here. And this is, again, kind of going back to, am I ready for this question? What benefits, monetary versus non-monetary, do I want to get from this business? I can tell you, I've worked with companies before that personally, they were financially sufficient. They didn't need any additional income. They wanted to do this because it was a passion of theirs, or it was there was some type of non-monetary value that they got out of the business. Maybe it's a nonprofit venture that they were passionate about, versus a monetary initiative, which don't be bashful about. There's nothing wrong with starting a company because you want to make a decent living. So. But understanding what is important to you in that process is absolutely essential, because then if you ever get to a point of frustration, which, running a business, you'll absolutely hit at some point, this is sort of meant to be that grounding document again, where you can come back to say, why am I doing this? And again, that's just an important consideration when you're looking at that. What size business do I need to build to achieve those benefits? So again, this is looking into, let's say it is a monetary consideration that you're building this business for. How many units do you need to sell in order to generate enough profit for you to maintain the lifestyle that you're looking for? That's an important thing. I worked with a borrower years ago, was basically looking to start up a retail location, and had great projections. Looked at the numbers, the business looked great. But when we backed into the actual number of unit sales he needed to produce, he realized to get the income that he needed, he realized there's no way there's not enough hours in the day to sell the number of units that he needed to sell to be successful. So for him, it became purely am I passionate enough to just do this without the income consideration? And ultimately he decided, it's not for me. But it was fun to kind of walk through that exercise with him, because, we kind of broke down this process to an extent to say, well, what is important to you? And, how does that drive into your numbers? So again, just figuring out what size that can be done. And there are a lot of resources out there. When I talk about your sphere of influence, there are a number of agencies out there that can help you with those numbers. I mean, your CPA is always a good resource for something like that. But there's other resources such as SCORE, where they actually have mentors that can guide you through that process. The DECD with the state of Connecticut, they also have a number of resources that can help build those out for you. But that is an important number for you to understand. Have I identified a real business opportunity on which I can capitalize? Anytime you have a business, the number one thing that it really boils down to is there a market for it? You can make the best widget in the world, but unless there's a need that's there for people to, that they're going to be looking out for your product or service, that's really going to be the basis for everything. And not only is there a need for it, but, you know, do they have the capacity or willingness to pay for that product or service? What assets do I need to purchase, rent, lease? Who do I need to hire? Again, those are part of that, you know, what am I looking at here to get this thing off the ground? And I'll say one of the more pertinent questions, especially in kind of late, is the who will I need to hire? Just because, as we know, there's continued to be labor shortages. So understanding, you know, not only what type of person you need, but what's the market for that person? What are the salary expectations in that field? Those are really important considerations because, you know, let's say you do have a captive market, you've got the excellent product, but you can't find the people to actually make or sell that product or service that need. You know, that's going to be a hurdle for you. So just again, understanding what those dynamics are. So now Sophia's looked at it. She's determined, you know what, there's enough here. She's comfortable with the answers that she's researched. And she said, you know what, this is good. I'm going to start building out my resource plan. What do I really need to get my cell phone repair business up off the ground here? So now she's looking at, okay, what do I need for the first 6 months of my business? And that's an important thing to consider because not only when you start out your company do you need the resources such as, you know, equipment, tools, things like that. But for your first 6 months, you don't necessarily know how quickly those initial revenues are going to come in to your business. So you want to plan for, let's say those revenues really start hitting their stride in, you know, month 5, but your plan called for them to start hitting in month 3. Well, you know, that's a time when you're going to need to revisit your plan and pivot because you don't necessarily know when that timing will be. You just got to be ready and be as nimble as you can to pivot for that. And again, having your plan in place, you're going to be able to kind of revisit this and say, you know what, maybe 6 months isn't enough. Maybe it took you 7 months or 8 months. But again, you can go back and then once you've got the foundation for your plan set, it's easy enough to tweak those and update that. So for Sophia, she determined she needs a space that she needs to lease. There's some repair equipment that she's going to need to service the phones that come in, and some supplies on hand to be able to service any of the phones that do come in for repair. Skill development, you know, it's a specialized thing. You know, depending on the phone type, there's probably ongoing training. It's a fast-moving technology, so she understands that there's going to be some ongoing development that's going to be needed. Staff, she determined that for her, a big component of this is really accounting and bookkeeping. Throughout her analysis, she realized, you know what, that's not necessarily her strength, so she wants to hire somebody to outsource that. And I'd say that that's also an important component as part of your plan. You know, don't be afraid to identify, you know, where are your weaknesses, and all you have to do is find somebody else that's their strength to partner with. Whether you bring them into your business, you hire them as an employee, or you hire them as a paid professional. You know, just understanding that, you know, that may not necessarily be your strong suit, or it may be something that may be too time consuming for you as you're starting up your business. But if you budget and plan for that, again, it's just one more area that'll help set you up to succeed. Some of the overhead, insurance, and taxes. And so all in, she determines that for the first 6 months, she's going to need about $21,000 realistically to, you know, get this business up off the ground, generating revenue and generating cash flow. And again, just to note here, this is also, Sophia did not budget in any type of living expenses for her as part of this plan. So again, her plan is to really start working, you know, she's going to work full time while she pursues this business venture and lets it grow into a size that she can then eventually migrate over to. And that might be different for everybody else. So if your plan is to stop working immediately and go full time into the business, you need to be prepared to have some type of cushion to cover those personal living expenses. So here we have Sophia's estimated startup cost of $21,000. She's saved up $7,000 so far to put through this. And again, that's an important part of the plan. Anytime you go talk to a bank, an investor, or anybody else, they're going to want to know, what have you contributed to the business? And for, any type of bank or investor, they just want to know that you're just as invested into this company, making it a success as they are. And so by having some contribution of equity towards that company, that's what that shows. So in this case, Sophia had saved up $7,000. So now she needs to raise $14,000. So that she's still going to need to come up with that money to find a way to make it. So again, part of resource planning is figuring out, interviewing really anybody you can talk to about it, stakeholders, competitors, other business owners for ideas. And as odd as competitors may sound, I've had borrowers that have sought out people that have the same type of business, but maybe in a little bit different market. They've talked to them about it, and you'd be surprising how many business owners are willing to network and share, at least to a certain extent, different information. Even from competition, you can always gather a lot by, say how many cars are in the parking lot at a given time, or how many customers, what do you see coming in and out for foot traffic, or even just talking to some of the employees, in kind of general terms. There's always a lot that you can kind of find out. So again, staking out ideal locations. I would imagine for a cell phone repair business, you're going to want to be somewhere accessible. You're going to want to be somewhere that's going to be visible. Locating discounted equipment and supplies. I find a lot of times business owners, especially if you're starting out, it's often overlooked that there's a lot of times a used market there for other types of equipment that you can buy, maybe reduce that initial cash need. Pros and cons of buying in bulk. And just a quick blurb on that. That is an interesting dynamic that I found that it's different from business to business. And I've seen different strategies all be successful. The key is really planning for it. Because if you think about inventory on one hand, let's say you're opening a retail shop, that inventory, you may be able to buy in bulk and maybe get it for half the cost per unit, which ultimately makes you more profitable. But you have to think that when you buy that product in bulk, that's almost like cash sitting on your shelves in your store. That's cash that's not in your bank, that's not available to cover your rent or your utilities or anything else. So I'd say, if the strategy is to buy in bulk to reduce your costs, plan for that and make sure that, it's built into your projections and you've got enough cash on hand to cover your other needs. Otherwise, I've seen plenty of businesses, and they've done it successfully, is you run a little bit more lean. You don't have as much inventory on hand. You probably have to order more frequently. There's a little bit less selection on the shelves for the customers, and you probably pay a little bit more of a premium, but conversely, you've got plenty of cash in your bank account to help cover that overhead. So again, evaluating that and finding out what the right mix is for you is especially important, because I can tell you from, the numbers of businesses I've seen over the years, understanding cash flow is the #1 challenge that businesses face in the first couple of years that they're started out. I've seen plenty of businesses that had great profit margins, were extremely profitable, but the cash flow component, they sunk too much money into inventory, and that created cash flow issues that ultimately they weren't able to make the rent payment because the cash was too, was tied up in inventory when it could have been put to use somewhere else. So again, the key here really isn't to steer a strategy one way or another. It's really just to make sure that you're planning for whatever your strategy is. Fair wages and benefits for employees. Again, kind of going back to that labor component, especially now, that's a very visible topic that gets a lot of, discussion, and it's not unique to any given industry. It seems to be across the board. Every industry is experiencing it in one way or another. And I've always thought for small business owners, a big component to really emphasize and discuss is that benefit piece. You're a small business owner. One of the big benefits is usually that you're nimble. And so there may be flexibility that you can build in, whether it's your hours, work from home. There's a number of different arrangements that you have a little bit more flexibility to work with. And again, that could be a huge selling component for a new hire to come on board. Federal, state, and local and sales taxes. the number one thing that you do not want to mess with, starting out a business is making sure that all your taxes are paid, and making sure that you've got a budget in there allocated to make sure that those are covered. Insurance, again, making sure that you've got the proper coverage, and rely on those experts, that professional sphere that you have around you to talk about what kind of risks are you taking and is there protection available for that. And then also pay for services, web design, hosting. There are a number of different ways that you can cover those costs, and not just web services, but a variety of them where there's going to be options where you can pay up front and you may in the long run save more money in doing so. But again, that's more cash out the door early on in the process, where maybe there's an option where it may cost you a little bit more in the long run, but you can spread those payments out over a monthly installment. And again, that's going to help your cash flow. It may not necessarily help your bottom line, but again, starting out, cash flow is really the primary driver. That's the thing you really want to spend the most time on, and really focus your energy on. And again, always coming back to that same question, am I ready to go on to the next step? So I'm sure you can imagine in Sophia's case, she was ready. So she moves on to developing her business plan. And the big part of this, and I've read a number of business plans over the years, and I've always said is, as a banker, I love reading a business plan because you can kind of get a sense, if a business plan is well written. For me, I don't know the cell phone repair business. I don't understand a lot about it. But if I read a business plan about it, it should give me enough information to kind of feel that excitement for you, where I say, you know what, I see what you see. I see the market opportunity. I see why you're passionate about it. I see why you think it's a good idea. And then, you're able to kind of dig into the numbers a little bit and say, okay, I see why this makes sense, and I see what the potential financial opportunity is there for you as well. And again, it really comes down to, again, I may not fully understand your business, but that's going to help me get there, and understand what it is that you're looking to accomplish. And same thing for an investor. They're going to be looking for the same thing. Convinces others to take a stake in you. Projects at least 3 years into the future. I know it's extremely hard to do because nobody really has the crystal ball. And that's one of the points when I say this is meant to be a dynamic living document. That's one of the key areas that should be a living document, that's going to constantly change. I worked with a customer a couple of years ago. They started out their business thinking that they were a wholesaler, and that was what their whole business plan was premised on. And there was a small retail component. Well, fast forward by the end of year one, he had flip-flopped, and from going from probably 95% wholesale to 5% retail, he was almost completely reversed by the end of the year, and almost 95% retail and 5% wholesale. And it was just because once he was in it and saw the market opportunities and saw some shifts that he could make, he kind of went back to the business plan, reworked some things, saw the opportunities that were there, and shifted his model completely. And you can imagine that then funneled into a change in his whole projection. Clearly outlined the business development plans in financial terms. So, what you want to look for is not only are you looking at year one, how are you going to make it through? I mean, that's usually the big question is, how do you get from where you are today to the end of the year where, hopefully you're profitable and performing, but also for the long term, because you may say, I'm going to buy this used piece of equipment today to get me started, but I know that's only going to last me about a year, or I'm going to outgrow my capacity with that equipment pretty quickly, and I'm going to need to buy more down the road. So what's your plan going to be when you start reaching those milestones? Or maybe it's not even equipment, maybe it's employees. Maybe, you can get by with, yourself or one other employee to start. But to hit a certain revenue threshold, maybe you need 5 employees total. And just understanding where those benchmarks are and where those thresholds are, so you can build those into your projections so that if, let's say it's the equipment, you can start building up a capital reserve account for that. And okay, I'm going to need X amount of dollars by this date to be able to execute that next order. So again, back to Sophia. So she kind of fast forward a little bit. She worked really hard. She raised her credit score. And all of this was really in preparation of being able to go meet with a banker to kind of talk about this is what she's ready to do. All along, though, Sophia had been meeting with her banker and kind of giving them updates on where things were. I've always said, you know, there's all these people around you that are willing to help you. Don't be afraid to ask for that help, even if it's in an early stage, just because, you know, you're not ready for the loan today. There's nothing wrong with reaching out and building that relationship and floating an idea and kind of talking about it and bouncing ideas around to see what'll work. So Sophia took a class on business plan writing, shared the plan with family and friends. One thing I hear a lot, especially for sole proprietor or small business, you know, one member LLCs, is a lot of times it feels a little bit more isolated, because if you're one person, if you're, you know, one person show, you know, you need that resource. You need those people around you kind of rooting for you and pulling for you. And what I found is, you know, family, friends, your professional network, all of those people are going to be rooting for you. So share that plan with them. Let people know what you're doing, because again, that's only going to help word travel, and you're going to feel that support system around you as well. And you may even have people that offer different types of advice. Could be financial support that they offer. I mean, there's a number of different ways that can add value. So for Sophia, she actually, even though she was building her relationship with the banker, the great news, after sharing her plan, her family and friends actually pulled their money together and helped fund her startup costs for her. So a little bit about, you know, one of the questions we get a lot is sources of financial support, you know, where that can come from. So one idea is angel investors when you're starting up a company. Angel investors, typically they're, you know, they have the nickname angel investors because they kind of come down, they've got tons of money, and they're just looking for, like an angel, kind of a great idea to say, okay, here's the money, run with the idea, kind of thing. And they take an equity stake in the business typically. Bootstrapping, so that term is really referring to really kind of tightening up the hatches to figure out where you can penny pinch every possible dollar in your company. What can you do? You know, maybe again, it's buying that older used piece of equipment to get you by for a period of time until you have the profits to reinvest in the company. But again, really looking at minimizing every expense that you possibly can while you're in that initial startup phase to try to retain as much cash, you know, to eventually use to grow. Crowdsourcing, that's a fairly new mechanism where, again, it's trying to pool together smaller amounts of money from a variety of sources. Friends and family members, that's a very common one. We see that very often. Incubators, again, that's sort of a newer space that we're seeing people where the idea is to kind of start a business just like you would with kind of a seed, you know, if you think about it that way, kind of get it started, get some initial seed funding, and then kind of grow the business from there. Local and state economic development organizations. So, you know, I can tell you what, one way there's a variety of different pools of money that came from a variety of sources in the last year, whether it was through the CARES Act or various kind of COVID relief funds. Money that was specifically allocated that was there to kind of help companies get through the last, you know, year and a half facing different challenges. But there's specifically different pools of money that are out there that are targeted specifically for economic growth. And what those funds are typically allocated for are the companies that maybe it's a great idea, there's a really strong market for it, but for whatever reason, it's something that isn't fitting into one of these other buckets for potential funding. And so, you know, from an economic incentive standpoint, there's a good reason to get this company going because it could create, you know, positive job growth, build the tax base, a number of different economic incentives. But if that business can't get the funding it needs, you know, it's not going to ultimately benefit anybody. So is money out there, and you know, we have some fantastic organizations here in Connecticut that have you know, money available, and really good resources and professionals to kind of talk through different ideas as well. Peer-to-peer lending, again, you know, a lot of these, this is sort of in the, we call it the fintech world, a lot of online sources to kind of find these types of connections for people with money to invest, and, you know, people looking, you know, with great ideas that they're looking to fund. And again, small business loans. So especially for kind of startup nature kind of stuff, Chelsea Groton, we're a preferred lender with the Small Business Association, the SBA. And what they do is they have a variety of different types of loan programs that help banks be able to fund some types of loans as well. So they're a great partner agency for us as well as we kind of look at different opportunities. And then the last one's venture capital. And typically a venture capitalist, they're sort of funding kind of like angel investors, but typically a venture capitalist, they're looking to kind of come in and really achieve some scale. So they may come in and say, look, you've got a solid company here, but maybe you need some of my contacts to be able to really scale this to a higher degree in there. And again, a venture capitalist or an angel investor, typically those types of sources are coming in as equity owners. So that's always another consideration to think about is, as an owner, when you're thinking about funding your balance sheet. So if you think about it, you have assets on one side of the ledger and you've got liabilities and equity on the other side. So you can fund your company either with debt or equity. And you have to, as the owner, be able to decide, you know, are you willing to give up some equity so that you don't take on the debt, or do you want to fund it solely with debt and cash that you're investing into the company? So this one's always interesting, kind of what does it mean to be strategic? You know, when you think about it, you know, if you think about a sailboat and you wanted to meet up with the sailboat, you know, which direction are you going to drive your boat? You're always going to drive it to the right, you know, right? It's, you know, which direction that sailboat's going, you want to intersect it at some point down the path that sailboat is moving. So that's what it really means to kind of think about it strategically. Think about where you want to be and the steps that you're going to want to take to get there. It's almost like thinking about, you know, day one, you're going to start your company and you can kind of picture what you're going to be looking at day one. Well, you want to start thinking about, well, where am I going to look at the end of the year? And what am I going to need to at that point? Again, kind of going back to the example of, did I buy an older used piece of equipment and I know that I'm going to outgrow it by the end of the year or 2 years down the road? Being able to kind of think, okay, I need to have this and this done and in preparation for that event to occur. And, you know, understanding for that, and again, most importantly, coming back in and making sure that that's built into your plan so you're prepared for that. This one I thought is especially applicable given the last year and a half, plan for change. That's pretty much, I think, the one thing that you can almost guarantee is that there's going to be plenty of change, which is more the reason why we encourage so many businesses to, you know, take the time to write the business plan. And I know when, you know, you're being pulled in a million different directions, writing a business plan might seem like a low priority type thing to do. But when that change occurs, that's, you know, going to be the plan that you're going to want to revisit to figure out, you know, are you on track? Are there changes that you can make? And you'll find that a lot of times if the plan is well written, a lot of times those ideas will kind of jump off the page to you. Learn from the past. Every business owner I've said, you know, said the first year they think about how many mistakes they made. Don't be afraid of them, embrace them, and learn from them. You know, they only make you stronger as you continue to grow. And again, when you make those mistakes, go back to your plan. You know, when we talk about the action stage of the plan and the ongoing management of your company, when you make those mistakes, jot them down in your plan. Make sure that, you know, you can plan to make sure that mistake doesn't happen again. Minimize risk. Think about at every juncture when you look at your plan, what could go wrong here? So going back to the example of timing of revenues, let's say your initial plan called for your revenues to stabilize within 6 months. What if, you know, it takes 9 months, 10 months to stabilize, or a year? You know, that's a risk to you as a business owner starting out. And again, just trying to minimize that to the extent that you can. So maybe that means, to minimize that, you work a little bit longer in your job before going full-time into the company to build up a little bit more of a cash cushion. Or maybe you build it into your projections that you've got some extra savings being set aside, you know, based off of that. Maybe you're merging in a different product line that'll help supplement those revenues. Whatever it is, you know, find out what that risk is, and then just see if there's a way. I mean, you'll never completely eliminate risk, but one of the biggest things in planning this is making sure that you understand where those risks are. You know, that you're really kind of going in with eyes wide open. And again, the action plan helps you stay strategic. It's really about revisiting it and understanding what moves can you make, where is the risk, and how can you avoid that risk. Oops. Sorry about that.
You have about
Okay.
10 minutes left, Rich.
Okay, perfect. So the other part of this is really setting SMART goals. So again, specific, measurable, actionable. You know, the goal here is really to make sure that as you're setting these goals, you know, that they're things that you can revisit and understand, you know, are the things that you're doing in your business plan, are they achieving the goals that you're looking to make? So again, I always thought this is a great example, and it's something that is applicable pretty much in any type of sales environment. You know, achieve an average monthly customer account of 500 within 3 months. So if you break that down into smaller bite-sized pieces, you know, you can say, okay, here's the tasks that I need to drive towards to get that goal. But when you break that down, you can say, well, what's an achievable number of customers to obtain in smaller benchmarks? You know, if you're saying you want to do it in 3 months, well, how do you know after month 1 that you're on track to get there? Or, you know, another way that I've always liked to break that down is, if you need to obtain 500 customers, how many customers do you have to talk to get that? So when you look at your success rate, how do you know how many customers you need to reach to obtain that 500 customers? And then again, what types of resources do you need to make that happen? So again, just to recap, the SMART goals, and, you know, again, that's probably not something that's new. You've probably heard that before. But again, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. You know, those are the types of things that are very easy to revisit as part of your plan, and understand, you know, am I, you know, on track? You know, is there something that you need to change? If you reach, you know, month 2 and realize that the metrics that you've been measuring aren't on pace, well, then you know that you've got to revise your projections from a cash flow standpoint to make sure that those all stay in line. And again, that could create new risks that you need to work through. But again, the idea is that it's going to give you tangible information that you can then react to. So Sophia is convinced. She is ready. She can do this. So again, the planning process really is to help refine the ideas, prevent errors, and, you know, I'm sure you're probably tired of hearing me say it, but again, you know, making sure that that plan changes as your business changes over time. Engaging stakeholders, keep people updated. You know, I can tell you from the banking side, your banker loves to hear about what's going on in your business, how you're doing. You know, we love seeing our customers be successful, and, you know, we love to just be a resource there that's there to help guide them through that. And even when you get the investments that you need, again, planning strategically to make sure that you're building a healthy business. You know, it's always one thing to maybe struggle at the start when you're building things. you know, but you're going to have different milestones based off of the life cycle of your business that you're going to want to reach. So again, just to kind of recap a few of the things, benefits of planning, knowing where you are, knowing where you're going, save time and money. You know, if there's costs that you can avoid throughout this process, you know, this can help you see what's down the road and what you need to plan for. Ask great questions, and again, don't be afraid to rely on the people around you to understand what it is that you're facing and how people around you can help you through that. Develop stakeholders in the process. You know, you want people vested in seeing you be successful. And again, the biggest thing is this plan is there to really help ground you to make logical decisions. Measure your progress with tangible goals. And again, put a focus on the finances, because sort of all the fun stuff that goes into the marketing plan and what a great product or service it is that you have, that all ultimately needs to tie into the finances to make sure that it's all going to work. So conversely, some of the risks of not planning, you know, you may spin your wheels, waste time and money that you don't need to, do too much, and you miss opportunities. So in Sophia's case, she went out and hired the accountant and the bookkeeper to make sure that she wasn't missing opportunities while she was busy doing accounting work. The risk of burnout, confuse or alienate investors. You know, they may go into it with an understanding of one idea of what your business is, but if you don't have a solid plan, you may steer off into different directions that may confuse your investor. Fail to do the math or quantify the success in terms of practical terms. So again, that goes back to the customer that I had mentioned before that I worked with, that just realized he couldn't sell enough of the products that he wanted to achieve the financial goals he wanted. So, you know, just understanding where all of that falls is important in this stage. So is there any questions or anything that anybody specifically like to talk about it, or anything about the presentation, or? Is anything, let's see. Oh, perfect. So Maria just said she'll send out the packet after the class. So again, if there's any questions or anybody even wants to talk about that more, or there's any information in there that would be helpful to talk about, feel free to reach out to either myself or Maria or Jen. We'd be happy to talk about that with you. And with that, if there's no questions, just want to thank everybody for coming, and hopefully this got kind of gave you what you were looking for. You know, one last thing that I'll leave you with is I find a lot of people get a little bit intimidated with the format, and there are a lot of resources out there. Specifically, if you go to sba.gov, there's some good templates out on their website. You know, and I've always found, you know, find a template that, you know, looks pretty good to you and has some of the key components that you're looking for in a business plan, and start working off of that, and then customize it to your needs. So.
Well, thank you so much, Rich.